What if a band reached their peak and then simply disappeared? Not a slow fade, not a gradual decline, an absolute vanishing. One moment they were everywhere. The next, they were gone. No explanations, no closure, no reunion shows. Rock history is littered with bands that captured lightning in a bottle, achieved massive success, and then walked away entirely. Some imploded under the weight of their own success. Others made a conscious decision to quit while ahead. Whatever the reason, these bands chose silence over a final goodbye. They chose mystery over closure. These are 20 rock bands that vanished overnight and never came back. 20. Young Marble Giants. The Welsh minimalist trio, Young Marble Giants, created one of the most uniquely influential post-punk albums ever recorded. Their debut album, Colossal Youth, arrived in 1980 and immediately set them apart from everything else happening in punk and post-punk at the time. The sound was sparse, minimalist, and absolutely original. It should have launched them into superstardom. Instead, they split in 1981 immediately after the album's release. They cited discomfort with touring and fame. The band members went completely separate directions and never reunited in any significant way. Colossal Youth became hugely influential for indie and post-punk minimalism, but the band that created it vanished before they could capitalize on their own innovation. They proved that commercial success wasn't the point. They simply didn't want to be famous. 19. The Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols released only one album, Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, in 1977. That single album topped the charts and fundamentally shaped UK punk forever. The album's influence is impossible to overstate. The Sex Pistols became the blueprint for everything punk would become. Then, they imploded spectacularly. Internal chaos, Sid Vicious's escalating drug abuse, and the tragedy of Nancy Spungen death in 1978 led to the band's immediate collapse. Vicious died of a heroin overdose in 1979 at just 21 years old. The other members continued making music with other groups, and the band reunited in 1996 for a tour. But they never released new material. They never recaptured the raw power of that first album. The Sex Pistols vanished as a creative force after just 3 years. 18. The Laws were a Liverpool band that created one of the greatest debut albums in rock history. Their soul album, released in 1990, was absolutely brilliant. Yet by 1992, the band had entered a prolonged hiatus that would last decades. They reunited a few times for rare appearances like Glastonbury 2005, but they never recorded new material. Their creative career spanned just a few years. The world expected a second album that would cement their legacy. Instead, they simply disappeared. One album. One moment of brilliance. Then, silence. The Laws prove that timing isn't everything. Sometimes a band can create something perfect and then decide they have nothing else to say. Before moving ahead, take a quick second to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next band that vanished. 17. The Buggles. You probably know the Buggles by their one iconic song, Video Killed the Radio Star. The British new wave duo formed in 1977 and released this global hit in 1979. It became the first music video ever played on MTV, achieving a level of fame that most musicians can only dream about. Then they vanished. One massive hit, one moment of absolute cultural dominance, and then nothing. They made a few other songs, but nothing captured the magic of their biggest hit. The Buggles proved that a one-hit wonder could still define an era, but they also proved that one era was enough. They disappeared into the background of music history. 16. Crazy Town, Crazy Town shot to the top of the Billboard charts in 2001 with Butterfly, a song that sampled a Red Hot Chili Peppers deep cut. The band mixed rock and hip-hop in a way that appealed to everyone from skaters to pop radio listeners. Their debut album went platinum. They seemed unstoppable. Then their follow-up album Dark Horse sold only 200,000 copies. The sophomore slump hit hard. Crazy Town couldn't recover from the failure of their second album. They faded from the mainstream and essentially vanished from popular consciousness. One platinum album. Then complete irrelevance. They became the definition of a one-hit wonder, despite creating more than one hit. 15. Glass Tiger created massive crossover hits in the 1980s with songs like Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone and Someday. They achieved commercial success and seemed poised for a long career. After one last top 40 hit in Canada in 1993 called Touch of Your Hand, Glass Tiger seemingly vanished. They went on a decade-long hiatus with members pursuing individual projects. They have since reunited, but haven't released a hit single since their disappearance. Glass Tiger proved that commercial success in one era doesn't guarantee anything in the next. They vanished at exactly the moment when they should have been capitalizing on their fame. 14. Right Said Fred achieved global fame in 1992 with I'm Too Sexy, a song that perfectly captured the early 90s growing self-awareness about media absurdity. The song topped charts in 6 countries. Their deliberately over-the-top performances and tongue-in-cheek approach was exactly what the moment needed. They had a few modest UK hits afterward, but never again connected internationally with the same impact. Right Said Fred vanished from the mainstream consciousness almost as quickly as they arrived. One massive viral hit, a brief moment of dominance. Then irrelevance. They proved that novelty can be powerful, but it can also be fleeting. 13. Chumbawamba burst onto the Billboard Hot 100 at number 6 in the late 90s with Tub Thumping, a catchy drinking anthem about getting back up after being knocked down. Casual listeners had no idea this song came from a band with a 30-year history of experimental music and hardcore leftist politics. The song was massive globally, then nothing. Their subsequent releases never resonated with the mainstream, despite an extensive catalog of political music. Chumbawamba called it quits in 2012, returning to their DIY principles after their brief mainstream moment. They took their unexpected windfall and funneled it to activist causes. They vanished on their own terms. 12. Alien Ant Farm topped Australian charts and hit number 3 on U.S. alternative rankings in the early 2000s with their rock version of Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. They took a pop classic and reimagined it with distorted guitars and aggressive drums for the MTV generation. Their single movies had solid songwriting but couldn't capture the same magic. They managed to release 3 major label albums showing genuine musical talent before the industry derailed their momentum. Alien Ant Farm vanished almost as suddenly as they arrived. One cover version that took over the world. Then irrelevance. 11. The White Stripes created some of the most influential rock music of the 2000s with their minimalist 2-person setup. Jack White and Meg White's chemistry was absolutely electric. Their albums were masterpieces. Then things got weird. In 2007, the White Stripes canceled a string of tour dates due to Meg's acute anxiety. Jack spent the next 2.5 years focusing on his side projects. Their last public performance was in February 2009 when they reunited to play We're Going to Be Friends on the final episode of Late Night with Conan O'Brien. In February 2011, the group formally announced their split. Meg White disappeared completely from public life. Jack White continued his solo career and side projects. The White Stripes vanished at their creative peak. 10. Daft Punk were electronic music pioneers who fundamentally changed what dance music could be. Their albums Discovery and Homework became cultural touchstones. They were mysterious, innovative, and completely essential to modern electronic music. Then, in 2021, they simply announced their breakup. No warning, no farewell tour, no final album. They just stopped. A short video showed them walking away from each other. Daft Punk vanished after achieving legendary status. They left us with a robot handshake and a legacy of dance floor revolution. They chose silence over spectacle, and that mystery still works like magic. 9. Audioslave was a supergroup formed from the ashes of Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine. Chris Cornell's voice combined with Tom Morello's guitar created some of the most acclaimed albums of the 2000s. They released 3 albums that sold over 8 million copies. They seemed unstoppable. Then, they simply broke up in 2007. After breaking up, Morello returned to Rage and Cornell pursued a solo career. They reunited briefly in 2017 to protest Donald Trump's inauguration, but tragically, Cornell died only a few months later in 2017. Audioslave vanished completely after their initial breakup, never to truly reform. One of the decade's greatest supergroups simply stopped existing. 8. Tokyo Juin was a Japanese rock band that released 5 albums and sold over 2 million copies. They created some of the most innovative and experimental rock music of their era. Their final concert in 2012 sold out completely. Then Ringo Sheena returned to being a solo artist. The band vanished entirely. Fans rejoiced when they reunited in 2019. But their 2020 tour was cut short due to COVID. A 6th album called Music was released in 2021, but since then they vanished again. Tokyo Jihen proved that even a successful band can choose to disappear and that reunions don't guarantee permanence. 7. Them Crooked Vultures was a legendary supergroup featuring Dave Grohl, Josh Homme, and John Paul Jones. They created some of the most acclaimed albums of the 2010s. They won a Grammy in 2011 for their single, New Fang. Then they announced an indefinite hiatus a year later. They briefly returned in 2022 for 2 tribute shows dedicated to Taylor Hawkins. Except for that, they've almost entirely vanished. One of the decade's greatest supergroups simply decided they had said what they needed to say and disappeared. 6. Panic. At the Disco Panic. At the Disco formed in 2004 and achieved global fame a year later with their debut album, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. The second single, I Write Sins Not Tragedies, is still a massive hit today. Their 2008 follow-up album was similarly successful. But things started going downhill a few years later. Members started dropping one after another. By 2016, singer Brendan Urie was the sole member. It became the Brendan Urie Band entirely, when Urie finally disbanded Panic. In 2023, the original band from the mid-2000s was completely gone. The original band vanished as members left one by one until nothing remained. 5. Spiritualized was a British space rock band that created some of the most innovative and beautiful music of the 1990s and 2000s. Then, after tours and album releases, the band essentially went dormant. They performed rarely and released music sporadically. For most people, Spiritualized disappeared from mainstream consciousness. The band that once seemed essential became a phantom, appearing occasionally but mostly vanished from public awareness. They proved that even a genuinely great band can choose to fade away slowly. 4. Creedence Clearwater Revival (CCR) had one of the most beloved catalogs in classic rock history. John Fogerty, Tom Fogerty, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford created legendary songs that defined an era. Then they split in 1970. The original lineup has never reunited. Legal disputes and old wounds kept the door closed forever. John Fogerty pursued a solo career. The band that created some of rock's greatest songs simply ceased to exist as an original lineup. They proved that success doesn't guarantee longevity and that old wounds run deeper than nostalgia. 3. The Smiths were perhaps the greatest band of the 1980s. Morrissey's vocals combined with Johnny Marr's guitar created absolute masterpieces. The chemistry was undeniable. Then they split in 1987. The tension between Morrissey and Marr ran so deep that reunion seemed impossible. Despite decades of fan petitions and hopeful rumors, they've both moved on to solo roads. Marr continued as a prolific musician and producer. Morrissey pursued a controversial solo career. The Smiths vanished completely and have never reunited. The music lives forever, but the band that created it chose permanent silence. 2. Talking Heads were one of the most innovative bands of the late 20th century. David Byrne's neurotic intensity combined with the rhythm section of Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth created art rock perfection. They were legendary. Then they stopped. Apart from a reunion for their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2002, further collaborations seemed unlikely. In 2020, drummer Chris Frantz wrote his autobiography dealing with Byrne in less than glowing terms. Coachella reportedly offered $80 million for a reunion in 2024 and was turned down. Talking Heads vanished and have never truly returned. 1. The Kinks were one of rock and roll's greatest bands. Ray Davies and Dave Davies created iconic songs that defined multiple eras. Then personal and professional friction tore the band apart. The ongoing saga of Ray versus Dave continued for over 40 years. At one point, the two brothers had fallen out so acrimoniously that reunion seemed entirely impossible. The band that created some of rock's greatest songs vanished as an original unit. Ray Davies pursued a solo career. Dave Davies attempted to continue the Kinks with a different lineup, but the original magic was gone. The Kinks proved that even legendary bands can vanish under the weight of internal conflict. From young Marble Giant's choice to disappear immediately after creating a masterpiece to the Kinks' slow dissolution under the weight of internal conflict, these 20 bands proved that the rock music industry doesn't guarantee longevity. Success doesn't guarantee an encore. Some bands self-destructed under pressure. Others made the conscious decision to quit while ahead. Whatever the reason, they all vanished. They all chose silence. Which of these disappearing acts shocked you most? Did you expect any of these bands to still be making music? Leave a comment and tell us which band's vanishing act affected you most. And if you love learning about rock's greatest mysteries and disappearances, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another exploration of music history's unsolved puzzles.